And not to be outdone, far right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil was ordered by a court to wear a mask this week. And now Brazil is actually trailing the United States with the second highest rate of infections of coronavirus globally. President Bolsonaro has fired 2 ministers of health since the start of the pandemic, and similar to Trump's denial, he was calling the coronavirus just a common cold or flu. Now we are seeing the pandemic ravage some of the poorest communities in Brazil, indigenous communities, majority Black communities, all facing the brunt of this crisis. And all the while, the federal government has not done much to step in, leaving it up to state and local officials to handle the pandemic on their own. We're excited to speak with Rodrigo Durao of Brasil de Fato, writer and editor who will speak with us about the political crisis and public health crisis in Brazil. So welcome, Rodrigo. The first question we have: Brazil is set to surpass the US as the nation with the highest rate of coronavirus infections, as I mentioned, and similar to how Trump initially downplayed it, President Bolsonaro has received a lot of fire over the months for just calling it a, quote, little flu and rejecting the WHO's guidelines on social distancing and wearing masks. Now we're seeing the poorest communities get hit the hardest. Can you describe what has led to this situation in Brazil?
We could say that a number of factors were responsible for this situation. First, Bolsonaro's alignment to other right-wing governments, especially Donald Trump, but also his tendency to despise science and global institutions such as the World Health Organization. To understand the Bolsonaro's government, you have to keep in mind that he needs to have enemies in order to unite his supporters. And scholars and scientists were chosen as the enemies. But this government is also against minorities and the most vulnerable people, sectors of society in the country. Unfortunately, the sectors are not receiving the help they need right now. The lethality of the COVID among indigenous people, for example, is more than twice bigger than compared to the rest of Brazilian society.
Many are saying that Bolsonaro has attempted to make a political game out of the pandemic, like when he fired former public health minister Luiz Henrique Mandetta for urging Brazilians to social distance and stay indoors. What are your thoughts on this?
The political and health crisis, they grow bigger by the minute. Since the beginning of the outbreak, we had not 1 but 2 health ministers sacked by Bolsonaro. And right now, we don't even have a health minister since mid-May, more than 1 month ago. What we have is an interim person in charge of the health for the country, a military person, a general that has not the knowledge enough for doing the job. And at the same time, Bolsonaro is trying to blame governors and mayors for the crisis, both the health crisis and the economic one that is likely to get really worse in the near future with a lot of unemployment. I personally believe that this is an attempt to control the narrative with an eye for the presidential elections that are due to take place in 2 years' time, in 2022.
And have Brazilians been looking to any other countries who have done a better job at handling the pandemic and comparing that to what the government of Brazil should be doing in this time? It seems the pandemic has really made it ripe for people to make these kind of comparisons because it's exposing so much of the character of each government in dealing with this pandemic and why some countries have been far worse off than others.
People are lost in the middle of conflicting information that comes from the government, and as a result, the situation is worsening. Right now, the most reliable statistics about the disease, they come from a joint effort from different media outlets, different newspapers and televisions that compile numbers that come from very different sources. because the numbers given by the government are not considered good enough. Yesterday, for example, the director of the World Health Organization said the total number of cases in Brazil could be even 3 times bigger than we think. And this happens because we don't test enough people in Brazil, according to the World Health Organization. And under that light, we could have about 3 million cases right now in Brazil and more than 150,000 deaths.
Absolutely jarring. Now, how have grassroots community organizers and movements for social justice in Brazil responded?
Well, at the same time that the Black Lives Matter protests, they started around the world, Brazilians took the streets of major cities to protest against Bolsonaro's government. What unites the Brazilian protests against Bolsonaro is the will to defend democracy against what they seen as the rise of fascism. Right now, one important movement is the one that asks for Bolsonaro's impeachment. There are many bills submitted to the Congress for the impeachment, but they are waiting for political will to go ahead. So the pressure is mounting.
Well, thank you so much, Rodrigo, writer and editor with Brasil de Fato, for joining us today.